he did a video series like in 2006 called So What? And what you're talking about sort of reminds me of those videos. I think there were like 4 or 5 parts to the series.
Mm-hmm.
Excellently done. And I'd like to, just mention that so that if anybody is so inclined to go and watch those, there's quite a bit of content in there, and stuff that you are talking about now fits with what you were discussing in those videos.
So just so people know, that video in 2006, my friends, Hank and Marilee Hobson, were living in Bend, Oregon, and they had put together a number of occasions for speakers to come to their house. They made provision for friends in their association to come over. Hey, it's just like any one of you could do that. Mark's done it himself. Come over to our house. I'm gonna hire or pay for or bring in somebody to come and speak, and we'll have them speak, and then we'll throw stuff at them. We'll buy a whole basket of little tiny cherry tomatoes, and we can all sit there and throw them at the speaker when he's done talking if we want to. I mean, or pea shooters or spit wads or whatever you want to do. Bring somebody into your house, have your friends come and listen, or put on a Skype call and let people listen and think. Doesn't mean they have to agree, but why I titled that talk So What is I was saying, do you think this is significant? Do you think this means anything? Is it nothing? Is it something? Is it? Here's something you've never in your life heard. Okay. At the end of the talk, I don't even know who this guy was. I only knew 1 or 2 people. There's about 50 people there, I think. And this one fellow said that he was a professor at Dallas Theological Seminary. And he said, if what you're saying is true, I need to rethink everything I've ever taught. I said, yeah, I think so. Meaning, I don't know what you've taught. I don't know who you are. I don't know anything about your classes, but everything I've learned for 50 years in the Christian church contradicts. So for somebody to say, yeah, I'm pushing the agenda, it's like, I don't know what you think you're hearing me say, but it's a rethinking of everything. It's not the same old thing with another coat of paint on it. So what? So what? If this means nothing, then, go watch cartoons, go do something else, go do something better. Hey, the Olympics are on. You can watch the Olympics. Anyway, go ahead.
When it comes to communicating, I've learned way back when, because I grew up French. Right, my language was French. Spoken at home was French. So later on, when I started speaking English and talked to other people, I would make sure that what they told me, if they gave me some instructions or what they said, I would make sure, could you say that again? I want to make sure that, in my broken English accent, I want to make sure that I understand what you're saying, because the concepts that I grew up with may not be the same concepts that they grew up with, because I grew up as a French Catholic boy, and as far as we're concerned, everybody that spoke English was a Protestant. Until I was in my teens, I did not even know there was such a thing as an English Catholic. So, wow. So communication, when somebody tells you something, I hear it from my ears and from my experience, and I can go away and do what I think he told me to say, or he or she. But I learned that because I made a few mistakes, not translating properly what they were telling me, because if they told me something in English, I would have to listen to it, translate it in French, and then go and do what they'd ask me. So communication is so important. So when somebody asked me at one time, who's responsible, the guy that communicates or the guy that listens? Is it 50-50 now? So it's 100%, because the one that's communicating has to make sure that the person he's communicating to understands what he said. So it's his responsibility, if you're giving commandments or orders or advice, that he understands what you told him. And the one that's listening, it's his responsibility to make sure that what he heard is exactly what this guy is saying. So we're both 100% responsible for whatever it is that we say or whatever it is we listen to. And okay, go ahead.
So taking that exact thought, imagine Elohim wants to communicate.
Yeah.
He gave us the Bible. No, he didn't give us the Bible. He gave us a communication, and what we ended up with is Catholic, and then there's various Orthodox. There's basically Greek and Russian and Romanian and what we might call just Eastern Orthodox, which is contradictory with Catholic. And then there's the Protestant, and I've heard greater than 50,000.
Yeah, it's over 50,000 today, yeah.
Over 50,000 different Protestant denominations. And I've heard, being Jews, I've heard people say there's just as many Jewish, call them denominations or sects or smaller groups of the Jews as there is compared to the Protestants. So we could say within the Protestants and Jews, there's 100,000 different classifications of interpretation, plus Catholic and Orthodox, which are big camps of perspective. Whose fault is that? Well, it's Elohim's fault. He wasn't clear. So for you to say, Mark, well, Elohim doesn't want anybody to perish, well, then he really, really blew it. And if he's Mr. Perfecto, he's a pretty lousy God. What? If it's the communicator's responsibility, 100%, to make sure that what he said was heard and comprehended, and if you've got over 100,000 different, oh, I heard him say this, well, then you did a pretty bad job. If the responsibility is the listener, and if what he said was clear, then we've done a bad job, we humans. The incredible thing about looking at the Paleo Hebrew is that it reconciles the entire matter. What comes to mind is what's called the Gordian knot. All I know, K-N-O-T, knot, like a piece of rope tied into this. Somehow it was this big ball, this knot. In the days of Alexander the Great, I don't know who made this thing. I don't know the legend of it, but all I understand was nobody could untie this knot, this Gordian knot. And so they brought it to Alexander and said, hey, if you're such a big shot, let's see you untie this Gordian knot. Ha! Kind of like pulling Excalibur out of the stone, the sword and the stone myth. So now somebody's confronting Alexander and saying, hey, are you the big shot or not? Are you the prophet or not? Are you the king? Are you the emperor? Are you the untie the knot and prove it? He pulls out a sword and cuts the knot in half. Get out of my face. Oh, you didn't play the game. Well, that's kind of like in Star Trek where Captain Kirk was in Starfleet Academy, and for the final exam, they have him, by design, it was pinned, you cannot get out of this situation. And they wanted each one of the students to, as captain of a starship, try to figure out, what do you do? No matter what you do, you're going to fail. But yet, if you fail, you can't be a starship captain. It was a very test, like the Gordian knot. And so what supposedly Captain Kirk did was get into the computer program of the whole school and change the program, tweak the program so that he could win. It's like, hey, you can't do that. And it was like, can't do what? I solved the problem. Well, how do you solve the problem of the great miscommunication? Because when you look at the 22 Hebrew letters, and this isn't 22, but I'm just saying, when you look at the Hebrew letters as pictures, and you realize the pictures are correlated to the Mishkan and proven again by Yeshua being the one coming from heaven, as in John chapter 3, Yeshua speaking to Nicodemus, to be crucified, put to the weapon, in the tomb 3 days and 3 nights, resurrecting, ascending, and coming back. It locks it all in. So Elohim, in spite of over 100,000 permutations and distortions of, I'm not listening, it must be your fault. And so when he says in Isaiah 28, verse 23, give ear as balance, he's putting the responsibility on us. Oh, I got 100,000 variations. Oh, have you given ear? Have you balanced? No, well then don't blame him, blame yourself. Oh, who are you going to blame now? Your instructor, your teacher, your professor? No, blame yourself. Here, we'll look up the word ayin, zayin, nun. In the Hebrew dictionary, or Ayin Zion Yod Nun in this case, page 16, Ayin Zion Nun, ear or handle, to give ear, listen, hearken, to balance. Balanced, leveled, weighed carefully, tested, proved. It's also belt, weapon, or implement, auricular with ears, earphone. So the fact that we have two ears, we're balanced. Do you know how to do that? Do you know how to use your ears as a belt, a weapon, or an implement? Well, if you're a carpenter and you've got these bags on and you've got a big pouch of nails on this side and just a tape measure on that side, it's going to weigh it down. By the end of the day, you're going to throw your back out. You better have the thing balanced. Aleph, Zion, Vav, Nun, balancing, leveling, weighing. So I'm trying to show you the way to use this. Aleph, Zion, Nun, ear, handle, balance. Aleph, Zion, Vav, Nun. And now I'm going to look at Aleph, Zion, Yod, Nun. Not there. Aleph, Zion, Yod, Mem, Aleph, Zion, Yod, Resh. Guess what? This is the word spelled Aleph, Zion, Yod, Nun. Not in the dictionary, not my fault. Well, Nun, Vav is a suffix, means our, us, ours. So is Nun, Vav the suffix meaning plural us? Or, see, you have to know how to read the words. Aleph, Zion, Yod then would be the regular word, and Aleph, Zion means, and Aleph, Zion, Yod means then at that time. So this could be read as then at that time that we take it upon ourselves to want to hear, to indeed hear, listen to his voice. Well, that's not the voice of the professors, the priests, the pastors, the rabbis, the clerics, the clerks, the literate ones. In fact, that goes into Isaiah 29, I think it is, about literate and illiterate. This study plays into it so beautiful, this stuff in Isaiah 28. And actually, chapters 23 through 28 is what I was going to talk about, which we may not get to. But what I'm saying is, we have to incline our ears to listen and hear to what he has said. That word amerti, I have declared. And that word amer is not just speak, which is debar, but it's to speak or say, which is also like mem lamed hey. And there's a few other words that mean to speak. But amer is a declaration, like Declaration of Independence. It's a fine, high utterance. It's also a picture of an elk with these great rack of antlers to take off and fly. It's like this majestic declaration. How do we hear his voice? Not in King James. It's not in Greek and Latin. And it's not necessarily in what your rabbi will tell you is the interpretation through the Talmud renderings of years of analysis that's in the modern Hebrew either. You could believe that if you want. Go ahead. Risk your eternity on that. Go ahead. Risk your eternity on what the Pope said.
Like I was saying before, it's Yahweh did communicate it properly to Abraham, to Moses, to his prophets. He communicated properly, and they understood at that time. From that point on, it's passed on to other people. It's like, for example, your in the States, you have your what do you call it? Your what the fathers wrote. What is it called?
Constitution, Declaration of Independence.
Constitution. You have the Constitution. It's quite plain if you read it with the proper understanding of what they're saying, but it's been perverted in so many ways because somebody's chosen to take this word and say it means this and not that. So you can communicate properly and have people understand, but then that doesn't stop people from perverting it, which is what's been happened to the word of the Father. He's communicated it properly through his prophets, and the prophets understood, but where does his responsibility stop if people purposely pervert it? So, like I say, it's his responsibility to make it clear to the people that he spoke to, and he did make it very clear.
You know, even if they didn't pervert it on purpose,
yes,
even if over all these years that was part of his plan to hide it until now, and when I say that, because he told Daniel, hide the words and seal the book. He said in the Song of Moshe, Deuteronomy 32, 33, he said, I'm just gonna go away and hide and see if anybody recognizes the fact that I've gone. And he said that of other places, you know,
Yes, he
Jeremiah 4. I'm gonna. It's translated divorce. The verse is shalak. It says, I'm going to banish you. I'm going to kick you out of here. Is it divorce? We've translated it as divorce. And so people have said, oh, the reason Jesus needed to die on the cross is because Israel's divorced. Well, it's only divorce because you translate it as divorce. If he said banished, rejected, kicked you out, sent you to go take a walk for a while. Think about it for a couple thousand years. Is it divorce? We've put the English word divorce. What is it? Shin Lamed Chet. As Kurt just put up, it's like the game telephone as a kid. You know, try your best to keep the message the same. It's going to get convoluted as you move around. Okay, so then you go back to this verse. We need to take it upon ourselves to try to hear his voice. And what I have found, I mean, even if you look at the English language, they keep modifying the Oxford Dictionary. One friend had the Oxford Dictionary and it filled up a shelf, and they keep modifying every year because words move around. They're not fixed. And so when you look at the Hebrew words and say, what does this mean? It's like, well, do we even know? I tried to liken this once to saying I had heard a concept. I don't know who's responsible for this, but they said the ideal chair, getting into this Greek concept. So I'm just saying I heard somebody talk about this, and maybe you know about this or maybe you don't, but this Greek concept of the ideal chair. Is there an ideal chair? Yeah, there's an ideal chair. Well, what does it look like? Well, let's start describing it. As soon as you start to describe it, everything you say is wrong. It's not an ideal. I could say, well, the ideal chair should have wheels. No, it should not have wheels. It should be soft. No, it should be hard. It should be oversized. No, it should be minimal. It should have a back. No, it shouldn't have a back. It should be one of those things for your spine. It's like, depending on the situation, it should be like a cockpit in a race car or a jet where you strap in. No, it should be loose so you can move around. And there is no ideal chair, but there's a concept that there's an ideal chair. That's like, what's the meaning of the real meaning of the letter? Is there an ideal meaning of the letter? Can you lock it in, or is it so big and fluffy? Is it the horsetail plant model? That was the significance of the horsetail plant when I saw that back in 2005. I was pondering the meanings of the letters, the potential of where the letters can be perceived from what aspect, and I thought maybe I'm just going insane. Maybe this is just too. Maybe I should just need to go take a break. It was in the springtime and living in a house that had a garden. I thought maybe I should just calm down and go for a walk in the garden. And I walked out there and I saw this thing called equisetum, the horsetail plant. And all of a sudden I thought, whoa, I recognized that the geometry of that equisetum, the geometry of that plant was exactly the structural concept of what I had just been pondering regarding the meaning of the letters as vantage points of perspective, of reference of each other letter, looking at each other letter, which became the whole top of the thing I call the chart with the vertical colored stripes. It was mind-blowing. And then when I thought, well, maybe I should just calm down. Maybe I'm thinking a little too much here about this. All of a sudden, my mind just exploded like launching a rocket. Wham! And then that just blew open this whole thing, which is now called the erectology study. It's what you get for thinking too much. If there's 1, 2, 3, if there's 4 words here in this verse 23 of Isaiah 28, 4 words telling us to take it upon ourselves to try to hear and listen to his voice. So it's got to be in Hebrew because his voice spoke in Hebrew, and even the word kol is modern Hebrew written in modern letters, but his voice was words. So it doesn't matter whether it was modern or paleo, but when his finger wrote, was it paleo, was it modern? Does that even matter? But if you look at the written, you'll realize I'm not arguing with any rabbis. I don't even know what they say. They don't make their stuff as public as everybody else does. They don't have to, as we talked before. People would just spit on it. His voice was in Hebrew. Look at the Hebrew letters. That's the only agenda that we're pushing here. Let's just look at Isaiah 28. I'll read from Stones to Knock. Woe to the crown of pride of Ephraim. That's the northern 10 tribes of Ephraim's drunkards. The delight of his glory is a fading blossom. So here Ephraim was the preeminent tribe of the northern 10 tribes who thought of themselves as much more grand and glorious than the Jews ever hoped to be. And they're saying Yahweh here is saying the pride of Ephraim, they're a bunch of drunks. Affected their own rationality. Fading blossom. It is a valley of oil upon the head of those battered by wine. It's like the anointing oil is on a bunch of brain dead, stoned out punks. Verse 2, behold, my Lord has a strong and powerful, in parentheses, wind. They add that because the publishers of Stones to Knock here said, my Lord has a strong and powerful, like a downpour of hail. Strong and powerful what? So in the Hebrew syntax, the Hebrew structure of sentences, sometimes it feels like it needs another word thrown in, which is what the English does. So that's why they're trying to make sense the best they can. Well, guess what? If you sit there and just write the words down in Hebrew and just look at the words, it's going to read different anyway. So you can't trust the English translation of even Stones to Knock. That's what I'm saying. If you want to know what Yahweh's voice really said, you got to just write the letters down and look at the words, which is why we do this type of study. Behold, my Lord has a strong and powerful, like a downpour of hail, a destructive tempest, like a downpour of mighty surging waters. He will lay, parentheses, that crown. He's going to wipe out the elite, the big shots of finance and politics and military and intelligentsia of Ephraim to the ground with his hand. Verse 3, trodden underfoot will be the crown of pride of Ephraim's drunkards, and the withering blossom, the delight of his glory, that is like a valley of oil upon his head, will be like a fig that ripens before summer. As soon as an observer sees it, while it is yet in his hand, he swallows it. In other words, when there's a bunch of figs on the tree and you're waiting, you maybe won't reach out and grab the fig, but when the season is first coming on, you've been waiting all year for those figs to ripen, and there's one ripe. Whoa, grab it and eat it. What he's saying is Ephraim was the pride of the collective of the 12 tribes, and they're so disgusting to Yahuwah that he says, when your time is due, when your time is up, when it's time to just take you out, the first passerby is going to grab you and just eat you, and there's nothing you can do about it because you're a bunch of drunken idiots. You've weakened yourself. You destroyed yourself. Isaiah 28, verse 5. On that day, on which day? The day of Ephraim coming to a conclusion. This is right before Ephraim gets obliterated for the next 2,730 years. So he's projecting that would be 720, what turned out to be 721 BC, when it finally happened. Ephraim was disposed of. So Yahweh's talking about on that day, Yahuwah's Zavot will be the crown of delight and the diadem of glory for the remnant of his people. Wait a minute, that word remnant means survivor. So once Yahweh takes out Ephraim, and then he says on that day, what? Is he talking about the day that Ephraim gets destroyed? There's going to be a remnant? So you have to know how to read this text. Is he saying that after the 2,730-year curse plays out, there's going to be a remnant, a surviving remnant, whether it's genealogically or whether it's Amunah, in the faith of heart, to want to listen? The scattered 10 tribes across the face of the earth. Hey, that would be us, the people listening to this call, the people that are willing to take these matters to heart and ponder them and think about them. That Yahweh's Zavot, not the Lord our God, but Yahuwah Zavot, that's his name. That's the name he gave himself, the name and title. Yod He Vav He, Zadi Bet Aleph Vav Tav, Yahuwah Zavot, will be the crown of delight and a diadem of glory. So I can now choose to take on this consciousness and say, I might be an idiot. I might be an imbecile. I might be a failing fool. But I'm going to choose to align with Yahuwah Zavot, to align my heart, to find my refuge, to apply my consciousness, my hope, and my obedience, because he said that this would be for me now a crown of delight and a diadem of glory if I do so. Okay, so I'm going to take on that consciousness and make it my own. I'm going to claim it. I'm going to lay claim to this offer. You know, I never heard the words Yahuwah Zavot ever in my life while I was in the Christian church, and I seldom hear those words even in the Messianic world, and certainly don't hear them in the Jewish or Islamic. So who's he talking to? Certainly not replacement theologists. Furthermore, not only will Yahuwah Zavot, remember Exodus 20, verse 1, Deuteronomy 5, Anoki Yahweh Eloheka, I'm Yahweh your Elohim, and he further elaborates his name to be Yahuwah Zavot, Yahweh of hosts, or that word Zavot means to swell up and give position to every letter of the alphabet, because the word Ot, Aleph, Vav, Tav means a letter of the alphabet. It's also a sworn sign or symbol or insignia, which each letter is. So it's play on words. He will also be a spirit of judgment for he who sits in judgment, a spirit of judgment for he who sits in judgment, and a source of strength for those who return from war to the gate. Now, I could elaborate on that. If I looked at it in Hebrew, it would maybe read differently, but let me just go on. He's just saying it'll be a spirit of judgment for it will be a tool of use and a source of strength. The ones who return from war, you leave, you never know if you're going to come back. If I heard it once said that 70% of all enlisted men who go to war don't come home. And the ones that do come home have PTSD and are all messed up. And okay, but it'll be a source of strength, a source of recovery. It'll be a place of restoration and sanity to turn to Yahweh Zavot. Oh, hey, let's change his name and call him Hashem or Adonai or the Lord our God. Hey, yeah, so that the words Yahweh Zavot, meaning he will cause to be as each letter says. That's Yod He Vav He, Zadi Bet Aleph Vav Tav. According to every Aleph Vav Tav letter, Zadi Bet, he will position in beauty as hoped for, Zadi Bet, and Yod He Vav He, he will cause to exist. He will cause to exist according to his Kadosh Shem, which is to say exactly how you can read the alphabet letter sequence, referring to him as for what his intentions are for his people, which is what the covenant is all about, which you've never heard in the Christian church or from the Jews, because it's all about Jews. It's not even about Israel, the 12 tribes. In fact, I just listened to a video from Rabbi Jonathan Kahn from July 18th, and it said, the latest prophetic message from Rabbi Kahn. And I looked at it, and he's always talking about the Jews coming back to the land and in 48 and taking Jerusalem in 67. It's like, this isn't about this stuff. What's he talking about? Talking about the Lord God and Jesus and the Jews. And it's like, well, you're talking about the armor. I mean, you're talking about just the shoe. Yeah, it's part of it, but where's the rest of the whole entire outfit? Listen to Rabbi Kahn if you want to. Go ahead. But this says Yahweh Zavot, the concept of Yahweh Zavot, which is the meaning of these letters as he built them, positioned them, and equipped them, will be a crown of delight, a diadem of glory, a spirit of judgment, which is determination, and a source of strength for those who survive and come back to the gate. And the word gate is Shinai and Resh, which probably is here. I'd have to look, but that means it's a synonym of erectology, which means to assess, appraise, evaluate, which is also a synonym with shemen, which is the word for oil, which means to determine the value, the worth, and the essence of what it really is. Verse 7, they too have erred because of wine and strayed because of liquor. The Cohen and the prophet have erred because of liquor and corrupted by wine. They have strayed because of liquor, erred in vision, perverted justice. It's like, gosh, it doesn't say that to drink any alcohol is a sin, because he even says you can have strong drink at Sukkot, but to be undone by it, to have too much of it, or to think that this is just all we got, something that Sally has said, nothing you can drink or smoke even touches the amazing benefit of seeing and of being able to wrap your mind around these concepts. And when you dull your mind, impair your mind, decommission your mind, as the pride of Ephraim's drunkards have done, you can't use your mind. And as I'm playing into the concept of using your mind to think, to intellectualize, to ponder, to imagine, to haggah, navigate these words, is a great thing that he's given us. Verse 8, for all tables are full of vomit, filth with no clean place. To whom shall one teach knowledge? This is verse 9. If everybody's drunk and stoned and already shot themselves in the foot, as it were, punched themselves in the head so they can't think, to whom will one teach knowledge? How do you even talk to these guys? If somebody says, you're just another Christian, you're just a wannabe Jew, you're an infidel, it's pseudoscience, it's woo-woo, put any stupid label you want on it. Well, then who can we even talk to? To whom shall one teach knowledge? Verse 9, Isaiah 28. To whom shall one explain a message? Hey, there he's getting into rational intellectual logic. To those weaned from mother's milk, removed from the breast? What does that even mean? There's another way to read that, but let's go on to verse 10. For it is commandment by commandment, commandment by commandment, line upon line, line upon line, a bit here and a bit there. Now, I've heard it said line upon line, precept upon precept, but that's opposite of what it says here. This says commandment by commandment, line by line, a bit here and a bit there. Verse 11, for as if with unintelligible speech and in another tongue does one speak to this nation. He's saying, I can speak as simply as possible and you guys can't understand. See, this whole thing I was going to talk about today with Isaiah 28 is all about clearly understanding. And yet we've made now about 400 hours of videos, still misunderstood. Verse 12, though he tells them, this is the rest, give rest to the weary. And this is satisfaction, yet they wouldn't consent to listen. They wouldn't consent to listen. Not only do you have to listen and take heed and then put it into practice, you have to consent to listen. That verse that I was speaking of earlier, where it says, hey, take ear, listen, that's much later on. I'm going back to the beginning of Isaiah 28. It's setting up for what we were reading earlier, but this is saying you have to make a decision. There's a dalet. You have to consent to listen. And the next letter is the hey, and then the vav, and then the zayin. So looking back to sequence order, just like last week with Psalms 139, I was overlaying that grid as if it were the alphabet upon that. If I choose to say, wait a minute, to consent to listen is a dalet concept. That's opening up a door. Hey, then something is revealed. That's what I'm supposed to be listening to. And then now I have to connect with it. That's the vav, which is the word Shema. And then Zion is a weapon, but a weapon is like a contractor's belt of tools or a policeman or an army soldier's belt full of gear. Well, that's kind of like the word azan, ayin, zayin, nun, which is to grab by the ears or be balanced. So if I consent to listen, it sets up Hey Vav Zion, which means, okay, now you've got to take the responsibility to do what each one of these letters represents. And so now I can plug in this alphabetic letter sequence as you might say, a paradigm of human consciousness on top of this script. And that's what I was trying to do last week with 139, using the alphabet as an index, a key, a paradigm, a structure. And I held up this transparent grid of a ruler to say, you know, you get this and you lay it over that, and then you can see how things really are. I've heard that people who know do that with law books. You can take this book of law, but you lay this page over it, and it'll show you 2 or 3 different words. That's all that matters here. Same type of thing. If you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. Verse 13, the word of Yahweh shall befall them, commandment by commandment, commandment by commandment, line by line, a bit here and a bit there. Wait a minute. Something's going on here. He says, I can't even talk to you guys. It's like unintelligible speech. The only way to talk to you, line upon line, precept by precept, here a bit, there a bit, but it's like a different language. I'm telling you, this is the rest. Give rest to the weary. Somebody who's saying, hey, any day's the Sabbath day. The Sabbath day is a concept. It's not a physical law. Physical laws don't matter. Well, that's debatable. We could discuss that. But the point is, Sabbath day, I get to sit down and rest. I could take this and say the Sabbath day is give rest to everybody else and rest yourself. But I could apply that to this and say, how many people are you beating the heck out of intellectually, emotionally, physically, monetarily? Give them a break. And if you have to do it begrudgingly, give them a break 1 day in 7. Then you can beat the hell out of them Monday or Sunday morning when they get up. Yeah. Show them who you really are. Give rest to the weary. Is that the real Shabbat? The word of Yahweh shall befall them, commandment by commandment, commandment by commandment, line upon line, line upon line, a bit here, a bit there, so that they will go and stumble backward and be broken and tripped up and caught. What? Mark keeps saying Yahweh doesn't want anybody to perish. But here it says he's going to speak this way so that, this is like what he wants to happen, they will go and stumble backward and be broken and tripped up and caught. Well, that sounds like devious intent. We could elaborate. We'll get to that in a minute. But here, verse 14. Therefore, so you have to understand that before you get to the therefore. Hear the word of Yahweh, O scoffing men, O rulers of this people who are in Jerusalem. Now he's talking to Ephraim's drunkards again. For you say, hey, we have sealed a covenant with death and made a compact with the grave. When the surging staff of punishment passes through, it will not come to us, for we have made deceit our shelter and taken refuge of falsehood. Hey, wait a minute. This is like those guys that are have the pirate's flag, the skull and crossbones, and say, hey, we are such mean, bad dudes that we're the baddest of the bad, and even when the devil shows up, we're going to give him a what for. And he's not even going to mess with it. We made a covenant with death. We made a compact deal with the grave, with Sheol. We rule the night. There was a guy a German field marshal who had a skull and crossbones on his furry hat. And he was like, I'm Mr. Death. I'm not afraid of death. That was back in the 1800s. Became the insignia of the SS. Skull and crossbones. The Yale Society of the American political elite. John Kerry and Bush and a few other boys. Really? You made a covenant with death, so it's not going to mess with you, huh? Yahweh is my Elohim. Verse 16, thus says Yahweh Zavot, behold, I am laying, and there's another way to read this, which we could talk about as part of this talk today. Isaiah 28:16, therefore, thus says Yahweh Zavot, behold, or Adonai Yahweh, behold, I am laying a stone for a foundation in Zion, a sturdy stone, a precious cornerstone, a secure foundation. Let the believer not expect it soon. What has that got to do with the skull and bones pirate guys? There's a whole different way to read that verse. Verse 17, I shall use judgment as a measuring line. Huh? What does that even mean? And righteousness as a plumb bob. Oh, there's the word plumb bob. That's like the word Anoki, only it's not the word Anoki. It's a different word. Hail will sweep away the shelter of deceit, and water will wash away the refuge of falsehood. And your covenant with death will be annulled. Well, this I can understand. and your compact with the grave will not be binding when the surging staff passes through. You'll be crushed by it. Yahweh's sitting there saying to them, you can make any deal with the devil you want. You guys who want to be, special secret group, this and that, and Rosicrucians and Knight Templar and Illuminati and bankers and politicians and Hollywood movie stars. You could be anybody you want. You think you made a deal with the devil or with death in the grave, and when the time comes, you're done. He's gonna send in like the 12 plagues to nail Pharaoh. Remember, he used lice, frogs, gnats, and hail and darkness and the water turning to blood, and then he just drowned Pharaoh in the water, in the bucket of water. Sea of Reeds, Yom Suf. Yahweh uses nature, even little tiny bugs, to undo. Who do you think you're making a deal with? Who do you think's running the wrecking of the world right now with the whole vaccine and the fake virus and the graphene oxide toxicity and whatever else it might be? Oh, did they make a deal with death? Okay. We made a deal with Yahweh's Avot. Verse 19, whenever it passes through, it'll take you. For it'll pass through every morning, by day and by night. Understanding of this report will bring sheer horror. It's kind of like, when the Black Plague went through Europe and the supposed, as they declared, flu virus of the early 1900s, which turned out to be something different too. But every day it was like, what's the body count now? Verse 20, for the mat will be too short for stretching out and cover too small for getting into. He's basically saying, whatever you think you've taken cover in, it's not enough. I'm going to get you. Verse 21, for Yahweh will rise up as at the mountain of Perazim. He will become enraged as in the valley of Gibeon. And some people don't like the idea of Yahweh getting mad. He's got a temper and an attitude to deal with. To perform his deed, unusual is his deed, and the doing of his work, strange is his work. What's it saying? Again, you look in Hebrew, and he's going to do some weird stuff. 22, Isaiah 28, verse 22. So now, do not scoff, lest your affliction become more severe. For of total annihilation, if I have heard from my Adonai Yahuwah's Avot concerning the entire land. And remember, this is before either the northern or southern kingdoms got whacked, and Isaiah was getting a little sense of what's coming, and he says, you better not scoff, because what's coming is going to be some big stuff. And just so you know, this is August 1st of 2021, and I've heard people who know, because we've heard people who know say all kinds of stuff, but people who know say something's coming, something really big, and it might happen within the week. Might happen within the next couple months. Might happen this year. Might happen within the week. Doesn't matter. Yahuwah is my Elohim. It's all I got, all I need. Verse 23, give ear and listen to my voice. Hey, that's the one we were talking about. Be attentive and hear my speech. So in spite of the fact that Yahweh is going to destroy the entire land of Israel, this would have been before 721 BC, and then the southern kingdom about 130 years later with Babylon, and destroy the temple and the palace and ravage the land and take everybody into captivity, killing millions, and a bunch of them jumped in the ships and ran to Carthage and set up the Punic Wars with Rome hundreds of years later. And it's like world history is driven by what we're reading here. Verse 24. Listen to this. I'm trying to show you how to read something spectacular, turning from the Hebrew, from the English into the Hebrew, into the Paleo Hebrew, and realizing there's something really wonderful right here in this passage. He says, give ear and listen to my voice. Be attentive and hear my speech. Okay, well, what's he saying? Oh, it's done away with, nailed to the cross. No, he's setting something that says, I'm going to say something. Now, pay attention to my voice. And you can only do this in Hebrew. If one plows to sow, does he plow all day, opening and furrowing the land? Well, now he's talking about a parable. This is kind of like Yeshua's did. It's like, no, when you plow and it's plowed. You don't keep plowing. It's when you plow and you're done plowing, it's plowed. Okay, he's asking a question. It's a riddle. Verse 25, surely when he smooths its surface, when you're done plowing and you're ready to plant, he will scatter black caraway and throw around cumin. Okay, he'll plant the seeds. He will place wheat by measure and barley where designated and spelt as its border. Okay, he's got 5 different crops. He's plowed his field. He's talking about a parable here. Remember, He's plowed his field and he's got 5 different types of crops that each go a certain place. And then you have a rotation of crops. And if this meet a year every 7 years that you don't plant, okay, what's he telling us here? Verse 26, one will be rebuked with judgment by his God who teaches him. Huh? So too, one will be rebuked by judgment of his God who teaches him. Oh, okay, so he's paralleling. When you plow, you stop plowing when it's plowed, and then you plant seed. Okay. So when we're doing something wrong, like if we're Ephraim's drunkards, once he's beat the heck out of us and ripped us apart, and we've put in our 2,730 years, then time to plant the seed. Once we've been corrected, we've been corrected. Corrected to do what? To listen to his voice, to the teaching. Verse 27, for not with a threshing board is black caraway threshed. And now we're back to the seeds. Nor does a wagon wheel roll over cumin. Rather, it's with a staff that black caraway is beaten and cumin with a stick. Oh, okay, there's different kinds of threshing. You thresh wheat one way, you might thresh corn another way, and you might thresh black caraway or cumin seed with another. Okay, he's talking about a parable of farming again. Verse 28. Bread is pounded, but not forever does one thresh it. For even if he rolls over his wagon wheel with its implements until they fall apart, he will not have milled the wheat. In other words, you use farming. You use this mechanism to accomplish one phase, another mechanism for another phase, another mechanism for another phase. Okay. You could apply any one of the trades: plumber, electrician, carpenter, painter. It's like a painter. Once you've sanded the surface, you don't keep sanding. You'll sand away all the wood. Once you've finished sanding, then you put on the primer, and you don't keep priming many coats. Yeah, sometimes you do 2 coats or use different kinds of primer, but once that primer's on, you're ready to put the next coat of the different type of paint, and until you get your finished surface. Now you can put multiple coats of your finish, but when you're done, you're done. That's what he's saying. Verse 29, this too has issued from Yahweh's vote. His counsel is wondrous and his wisdom abundant. Huh? What? What to? Let's go back. Verse 23. Give ear and listen to my voice. I'm going to tell you something, but you have to look at it in Hebrew. And then verse 20 says, see, this is so wonderful. His counsel is in paleo, and his wisdom is abundant. What? That's right. If you don't look at it in paleo and listen to his voice, you're going to miss the point of the parable. So we should do it on another hour if you guys want to keep going. But what I'm saying is that that's the end of chapter 28. Now, if you look at chapter 29, I did a whole video about this a year ago up in Montana. It's the one I mentioned. Starts off with a picture of a sunken helm encrusted with barnacles. Oh, Ariel city where David encamped. I'm not going to go into that right now, but verse 9 of Isaiah 29, ponder this and be astonished. They have been utterly blinded. They were drunk, but not from wine. They staggered not from liquor, but Yahweh has poured upon you a spirit of deep sleep and closed your eyes. He's put you into a coma. He covered the prophets and your chiefs, the seers. To you all, the true prophecy is like the words of a sealed document, which one gives to a literate person saying, please read this. And he says, I can't read it. It's sealed. Then he gives the document to an illiterate person saying, read this, please. And he says, I'm not literate. And years ago, this was back in, I think it was 2006 or 2007, I was at somebody's house for a Pesach Seder. She made a really nice dinner. She was literate Hebrew. She taught Hebrew. I never took a class from her or anything. And I said, hey, look, I just found this thing in this verse that I can read this Lo Yedati Sefer. And if I don't know what the meanings of the letters are, but I'll look at the shape of the letters and write them out. And I actually have a picture of this carved into a piece of stone. And I've up in Sarnia in Canada, I did this. It's on the internet. You're totally illiterate. All you do is you look at the shape of the paleo letters and you say what comes to mind, and you look at the meaning of the letters, you write it down, and it tells you what's the hidden mystery in the entire scripture. By saying the words, I'm not literate, Lo Yedati Sefer, by being illiterate, you can actually interpret the entire message, which is encrypted in the 22-letter Hebrew alphabet. And she was saying, it doesn't work that way. You can't do that. And it's like, I don't know that. I'm not literate. Well, but because she's not illiterate, she can't read it because she's literate. Like this. You can't read it. It's a sealed book. No, but if you're illiterate, you can read it. It becomes unsealed. And there was this impasse, and all of a sudden I realized, wow, we're living this verse here now at this table, and she still couldn't understand what I was saying. Hey, Don Krebs, if you're watching this video, it's your house. The point is, how do you do this? You go on ahead and read through Isaiah 29, and it gets into Yahweh restoring his people finally. But let me go back to Isaiah 28, where we're at. Now, before I lay into Isaiah 28, you got to start back in Isaiah 23. And that's where this thing gets bigger. And in the interest of time, we could stop right here.